The Packers remembered how to win, but not so much for the Dolphins. The Vikings are bad at field goals, Fields could win the starting role, and the Giants need the world's smallest violin. Welcome to the Mish Po. Alrighty, everybody. Week 3 is right around the corner. We just finished up with week 2. Lots of shuffling around in that standings and the power rankings to be is inclusion of that. But we can't start this without a beer. I've got a different beer than High Life this time. We've got some Oktoberfest lager here from Central Waters Brewing Company, based out of Amherst, Wisconsin. So we'll give that a crack, and we'll get into the show. Alrighty. Business, same as has been for the last couple weeks. Still need some payments for some people. Eventually, I'm just going to start reaching out to people individually after a while. So just let's hope we don't get to that. But yeah, just send me $15 Venmo, PayPal, Zelle, check, cash, whatever works, just as long as I get it eventually. Which brings us on to some football. Transactions, we had one trade in the past week since last week's episode. Fiola traded Zach Pascal to Sam for James White. This is like a lot of trades that we see. Fiola needed a running back, and Sam could have used an extra receiver, and so they just swapped. I thought it was good for both people, but Fiola benefited more, I think, because I think James White's a bit of a better fantasy player than Zach Pascal is. So I gave Fiola a B+ on this trade, and I gave Sam a B-. So that's all the transactions. I feel like we've been a bit low on trades this year, which is kind of interesting. We'll see if it picks up a bit more as we get into the season a bit. Which brings us on to the matchups. Starting off with me versus Adam. Fantasy happens, not everyone, most people thought this would go the other way, including myself, and I was hopeful, but, my running backs just couldn't pull through for me, as well as, a couple other guys. So, I ended up scoring the least amount of points this week, I believe, and Adam beat me 106.92 to 76.38, and only 27.3% of people got that matchup correct. So, moving on to T-Corn versus Michael. This one was much closer, and also a bit more low scoring. I've noticed that as a trend as well. This week, lower scoring matchups had more than one person below 100 points this week, which is the first for this season. Obviously, we've only been 2 weeks in, but yeah, this one much closer, moderately scoring game. But Michael got to 2-0, won 109.66 to 101.32, and 63.6% of people got that matchup correct. Moving us on to Kale versus Brian, the highest scoring matchup that I've covered so far. Just a lot of things went right for Caleb, and not so much for Brian, but that happens. Derrick Henry, what a guy. Final score for this one, Caleb 132.82 to 112.5. 45.5% of people got that matchup correct, so a little bit less than half. Moving us on to Derek versus Abby. We've got the highest scoring matchup, well, probably actually the highest scoring matchup, but I was going to say the highest scorer of the week. We'll just jump into the score here. Abby she on the back of Aaron Jones and Cooper Kupp. Between the two of them, she got almost 80 points. She ended up winning 158.95 to 138.9, so still a very good performance from Derek. Would have beaten, I'm sure, more than half these teams in the league. But you know what? Stuff just happens that way sometimes. 45.5% of people got that one right as well. And Abby, Adam, this is your first time in the league, but if you get the highest scoring points for the week, you get yourself a beer. So, congrats. Moving us on to Sam versus Bruce. Bit of a lower scoring game, and not all that close. Let's see, how did Sam describe it? It's like the guys both started preschoolers in your lineup. So, that's one way to look at it. Final score of this one, Sam won 107.68 to 86.06. And only 18.2% of people got that matchup correct. So a trend this week I noticed is a lot less correct picks. Moving us on to Fiola versus Colin. This one's probably the biggest blowout of the week. Just a lot of things went right for Fiola. You know, sometimes that'll happen for you, and sometimes it won't. Patrick Mahomes did good. You know, pretty much everybody. Jamal Williams didn't do super great, but got 27.7 from Terry, and you know, a lot of guys above 10 points, which is always a positive. Final score for this one. Fiola won 147.92 to 87.84, and 81.8% of people got that one correct, which I believe is just all but one person, maybe? I don't know. But moving us on to the last matchup of the week, we've got State Farm versus Lincoln. This one was decently high scoring and relatively close. Not all that close, but, you know, close-ish. Decent scores. Kyler Murray got 35, but only 1.6 from Clyde. You know, was enough, though. And State was able to get the win, 134.2 to 112.96. 54.5% of people got that matchup correct. On the week, I personally went 2-5, so opposite of last week, so a total of 7-7. The weekly point leader for this week was State Farm. And now, as we're going farther into the season, we can start to do totals. So the total point leader is State Farm with 11. And the best average is State Farm with 5.5. And like I said, that the average, or we got, you know, less points right this week. Last week, on average, we got you would get 4.1 picks correct. This week, we only got 3.2, about one less pick correct than last week. So we'll see if we can do better next week. Alrighty, now let's move on to this week's power rankings. In 14th, we've got Brian. You are 0-2, so not a great start to the season. I think there's only 2 0-2 teams, and you just happen to be one of them. Last week, you lost to Caleb. It was, average, somewhat close, but, you know, not the best performance. Last week, you were number 11, so you did drop a little bit. So we'll see if you can turn things around this week. Moving us on to number 13, another 0-2 team. We've got Lincoln. Last week you were 12, so you dropped a little bit as well. And you played State Farm last week. So that one was, I think that was close. I can't remember, but I just talked about it. Doesn't matter. We'll see if you can turn things around too. Move up in the power rankings a bit. Get your first win. Moving on to number 12, we've got Adam. You did beat me last week. You did go up 2 spots in the power rankings, but to be honest, I don't know. I thought it was kind of a fluke. We'll see, though. Got yourselves a decent opponent this upcoming week, so we'll see if I'm wrong. You know, I don't make the rules. Adam at 12. Number 11, we've got Colin. You know, I probably should have you up higher, but again, I don't make the rules. You were 5 last week, and you kind of got blown out by Fiola. So that's probably part of the reason why you're so low. And you go up a decent opponent this week. So we'll see if you can put up a fight this week. Moving us on to number 10, we've got T-Corn. You were 8 last week, so dropped a couple spots. You lost to Michael, but, you know, Michael did put up actually, he did all right last week. It was relatively close. So, you know, things happen sometimes. We'll see if you can get it turned around next week. Moving us on to number 9, State Farm. You climbed 4 spots this week, so that's good. You beat Lincoln. And I would argue that you have a decent shot at winning again this week. So State Farm at 9. Moving us on to number 8, we've got Sam. Dropped 1 spot from last week despite beating Bruce. And I do maybe think you could go up a spot or 2 next week because you do have a decent opponent. In terms of a decent, not good opponent. So see if you can get yourself a victory. So that's Sam at 8. Number 7, I have myself. I believe that's where I was after the draft, which is kind of cool that I'm back here. Except for, you know, I was 2 last week, so I wish I was higher. Lost to Adam, but I'm hoping I can get a good rebound. My boys can come and perform, and we'll turn things around. Moving on to number 6, we've got Bruce. Dropped a couple spots from last week where you were number 4. You did lose a not so close game to Sam, and you did put up, I think, the second or third least amount of points on the week. So we'll see if your guys can rebound and come away with a victory for yourself next week. Number 5, we've got Derek. You climbed up 1 spot. Again, highest probably you've ever been. You did lose last week. But you did put up a really good amount of points, probably third or fourth highest. So pretty good performance. You do have a tough opponent this week, so we'll see if you can just keep riding that hot train. I don't know. Moving us on to number 4, we've got Abby. Pretty convincing win last week. Moved up 6 spots. So Abby, you've just been doing nothing but climbing in these power rankings. As I mentioned, beat Derek last week, and you could probably do a pretty good job this upcoming week too. But you've got a tough opponent, so we'll see. Moving us on to number 3, we've got one of 2 undefeated teams. We've got Caleb. You beat Brian last week, but you do have a decent opponent this upcoming week. You have moved up 6 spots since last week's, and I believe you've moved up even more since the one prior. So yeah, Caleb at 3. Moving us on to number 2, we've got Fiola. Moved up 1 spot last week. And you did win. So you're 1-1, just like most of us. 4 of us aren't 1-1, which is kind of common for this early in the season. Teasing a decent opponent that's upcoming, so we'll see if you can get yourself another victory. And bringing us on to number 1, Michael didn't move at all last week. It was closer than you probably would have hoped, but you did get the win last week against T-Corn. You got yourself a pretty decent opponent upcoming, so we'll see if you can keep this undefeated streak going and get yourself to 3-0. So that is Michael at number 1. Alright, now probably the part you've all been waiting for, this week's matchups. First up, we've got me versus Brian. Key players for myself are my starting wide receivers, Amari Cooper and Deontay Johnson. Amari and Deontay. Amari didn't do super great last week, but Deontay had himself a decent game. But the reason I put them on here is because they are both questionable right now. So if those 2 guys both don't play, that would be pretty bad for me. So we'll see if those guys can suit up. And for Brian, key player, Ezekiel Elliott and Trey Sermon. Zeke has not... week 1 did pretty good, or not so good. Week 2 he's did a lot better, so we'll see if Zeke can keep that going for you. Trey Sermon is my second key player for you, Brian. He's got 0.8 points on the year. He is questionable with a concussion, so he might miss this week. He's actually probably going to miss this week, so you may want to look to pivot there. Actually, don't, because you're facing me. That's just what happens sometimes. And I picked myself as the winner. I'm thinking I'm going to rebound and get myself a victory here. Moving us on to T-Corn versus Fiola. Key players for T-Corn, we've got DeAndre Swift, who didn't do super great last week, just despite facing a not-so-great Packers run defense. He did get a decent amount of receptions at the end of that game there, which definitely helped out, especially because this is a PPR league. So we'll see if he can do better against a tough Baltimore defense. And the second key player for T-Corn is your flex play, Javonte Williams, who has been doing a bit of a timeshare with Melvin over there in so we'll see if he can do something decent against the Jets, who, if you haven't heard, aren't all that great. Moving us on to Fiola's key players. Would you look at that? There is another Detroit running back. We've got Jamal Williams. It was great seeing him at the Packer game, which I was at. Waited until he left the field, until I left the stadium, despite there being a thunderstorm coming. Anyway, Jamal, not super great last week, did a lot better the week prior, so we'll see if Jamal can rebound and get himself a decent score against a tough Baltimore defense. Moving us on to Fiola's second key player, Terry Mclaren, a guy who did have a good week last week, scoring 27.7 points. Goes up against Buffalo this week. Defense not as good as we probably would have thought, but that game could definitely be a shootout. So yeah, that's Terry McLaurin for Fiola, and I picked my winner for this matchup as Fiola. So moving on to the next matchup, we've got Colin versus Bruce. Key players for Bruce, we've got Tyreek Hill, who, despite being one of the best receivers in the league, only put up 5.9 points last week. So we'll see if he can rebound and get some good scoring action for you, Bruce, there. And second key player, we've got Dallas Goedert. He didn't do super great last week, but Zach Ertz was put on the COVID list. He is vaccinated, so he could make an appearance for this game against Dallas. But if he's not there, then Dallas Goedert definitely got that starting tight end job and could definitely have a solid performance. Moving us on to Colin's key players, another Philadelphia Eagle. We've got Miles Sanders. Not super great last week versus San Francisco, but going up against Dallas, who is an alright defense. So we'll see if Miles can keep it going. I guess not keep it going, get it going again. And get some good score for you. And then moving on to Colin's second key player, we've got Kenny G. Not super great this season so far, averaging about 8 points a game, but he's going up against the Atlanta Falcons defense, who is not all that great. So we'll see if Kenny can get things turned around. And for this one, I have picked my winner as Colin. Moving us on to Michael versus Derek. Who would have thought this matchup would be so exciting? Both teams are definitely rolling right now, and matchup of two top 5 teams. Key players for Michael, we've got Antonio Gibson, who is averaging about 9.5 points a week, but we'll see if he can turn things around and perform like we all expect him to. Bringing us on to Michael's second key player, we've got Corey Davis. Great week 1, not so great week 2. So we'll see which version of Corey Davis we get this week. To be fair, though, the passing offense just wasn't there for anybody for New York last week, with Zach Wilson throwing, 4 or 5 interceptions. So not super great for Corey Davis. Moving us on to Derek's key players, we've got Jalen Hurts, a surprise a bit. Week 1, almost 30 points, but this past week, only 20. So we'll see if Jalen can get some decent scoring against a division opponent in Dallas. A lot of guys from that game. Moving us on to Derek's second key player, we've got Chris Godwin. A pretty decent start so far to the year. They're going up against the Rams, who is a pretty high-powered offense. I imagine that one, it could be definitely a shootout. I expect a lot of scoring in that game, and Chris Godwin definitely could be a benefactor of that. And for this matchup, I have picked my winner as Derek, and he is my upset pick of the week. Moving us on to Sam versus Lincoln. Key players for Sam. First up, we've got Melvin Gordon. Great week 1, not so great week 2, but he's got the Jets this week, and they're not that great. So we'll see if Melvin can rebound and get you some good points. Moving us on to your second key player, we've got Robert Anderson. Decent first week, not so decent second week. So we'll see if he can rebound against a not so good Houston Texans defense. So everything's looking like a possible rebound for those two players. We'll just have to see it through. Moving us on to Lincoln's key players, we've got Joe Mixon. Pretty good week 1, but then not so great week 2. But unlike those previous 2 players that we just talked about, he's got Pittsburgh's defense, who is actually pretty solid. Kept the Bills in check week 1, and I don't remember how they did last week, but and it's a divisional game, so we'll see how well Joe Mixon can do in that matchup versus the Steelers. Moving us on to your second key player, we've got DK Metcalf. A bit underwhelming, I would say, for DK as a guy who kind of broke out last year. We know that he could be getting some good points. They just been all going to Tyler Lockett. Got Minnesota this week, and their defense is not all that great, so we'll see if DK can come out and give you a solid performance. For this matchup, I picked my winner as Sam. Moving us on to our penultimate matchup for the week, we've got Caleb versus Abby. Again, a matchup of 2 pretty solid teams, but only one can win unless there's a tie. So we've got key players. First up for Caleb, we've got Matthew Stafford. He's been playing pretty good so far this season on a new team, and just like the thing I was talking about for Chris Godwin, going to be a high-scoring matchup, I think. Tampa Bay's defense is pretty good, but then again, so is the Rams. But it was a high-scoring matchup against Dallas for Tampa Bay, so I expect Stafford to be slinging that rock around, and we'll see if he can get some good points out of it. Moving us on to Caleb's second key player, we've got George Kittle, who has not been doing super great. Only 4.7 points last week. He's going up against the Packers this upcoming week, and they gave up decent yardage and a touchdown to TJ Hawkinson. So we'll see if Kittle can repeat what Hawkinson did, or maybe even improve on what he did. Moving us on to Abby's key players. We've got Joe Burrow, who did not do super great last week. Threw a couple interceptions, and it's got the Pittsburgh defense, who is a pretty solid defense, I think. So we'll see if Joe Burrow can turn things around and get himself a divisional win and a decent fantasy day. And Abby's second key player, we've got Mr. Cooper Cup of Coffee. He's been doing really good this year. The number one wide receiver in the league, PPR wise, through the first 2 weeks of the season. And you've got Tampa Bay against him next week, so definitely gonna be helpful to have a high-scoring matchup in that one for you. And it doesn't hurt that the quarterback for Cooper Kupp is on the other player's team, so anything that he scores, you'll score, and then some. For this matchup, I've got Abby as my winner, and she is my lock pick for this week. Moving us on to the last matchup of the week, we've got State Farm versus Adam. First key player for State, we've got Clyde Edwards, who not doing super great this season. The wide receiver running back 49 on the season. Only scored 1.6 points last week. So we'll see if he can turn himself around this week and get himself a good score. And then I just said tight end because you have Evan Engram, who is currently starting in your lineup, but we don't know for sure if he's going to be playing. If he does, he could definitely have himself a good fantasy day. But if you don't play him, you will be playing Max Williams, and he had a great week 2, not so great week 1. And so we'll see which version of Max we get this upcoming week. So that is State's second key players. Moving us on to Adam's key players, we've got himself a pair of running backs here. We've got Elijah Mitchell, possibly the starting running back for the 49ers this week against the not so tough Packers run defense. Could be good for him, but you never know. This is probably going to be his second start of the season. Or maybe of his even career. This is because he's a rookie. So that's first key player for Adam. Second key player for Adam, I feel like I brought him up every week. Ronald Jones. He's averaging about 3 points a week because he got positive this past week, Adam. So that's good for you. And he's going up against the Rams. So we'll see if he can perform in that matchup. And I've got myself picking State for this one, and I probably would have picked him as my lock if I had not picked his wife in that previous matchup. So yeah, that is all the matchups, and that is this week's episode. So thanks for watching. Be sure to try to pay me, because that'd be pretty cool. And then, yeah, thank you, and thank you. Alrighty, I'm going to flip this on Adam, because he beat me last week, and I did not like that. So, Adam. That felt like it was going to be close, but it really wasn't.